everybody, and welcome to the WhatCulture Horror Podcast, hosted by me, Ash Millman, and joined by she, Kirsten Ria.
Hello.
And also by he, Josh Brown.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody, indeed. Now, this is the Horror Podcast. We're here to talk horror movies, as you might expect from such a title. And previously, we've broken down all the different subsets of horror, different subgenres, things that go into making a scary movie scary, and all of our favorite and least favorite parts of that as well. So this week, the special topic, the topic of the week is comedy horror. You know, things that make you laugh that are also very, very scary. Now, comedy and horror kind of share that wholesome ground of eliciting an audience reaction. They're both about either making you laugh or scream. So combining them tends to make some very interesting movies that either land the mark and are brilliant and manage to have a little bit of everything in them, or are the worst trash that you'll ever watch. Because when a bad horror comedy comes around, oh boy, do you know it, is all I can say about that. So how about you guys? What do you think about comedy horrors? How do you feel about them? Do you like your horror? Do you like your scariness with a dose of funny in it? Or do you feel like it's kind of a rare beast to pull off?
I think perhaps because it's so rare, that's what makes it so good. Like you said, there's nothing lamer than a horror comedy that just falls completely flat on both ends. But in terms of the subgenre at large, it's in fact the subgenre that got me into films in generally. Growing up, my favorite movies were horror comedies. Even the bad ones, I liked a lot of them. But two that I'm probably going to talk about today, Shaun of the Dead and Evil Dead 2, they got me into not only horror movies or comedies, but film in general, because I feel the way they're constructed, we talk about this a lot, but it needs to be so finely tuned. You can't just slap something together. I feel when it comes to horror and comedy as separate genres, I feel they are the two biggest ones where filmmakers go, well, I could just do that. It's just a comedy. It's just a horror. I can just fart one of those things out in between my two passion projects and make a lot of money. But it's not that simple. Comedy is incredibly hard to pull off, both from a filmmaking standpoint and an acting standpoint. It's not something you could just phone in. You need to have impeccable timing, as I harshly found out trying to read funny scripts and mangling them to be honest, I still do that now. These tour writers that come in and I just ruin their words because I can't deliver it properly. But I feel it's one of those, like horror in general, it's written off, but when it comes together and when it's done well, it's infectious, because like you said, you get the best of both worlds. And because horror and comedy itself are so tightly attuned to each other, it just complements each other surprisingly well in a way that I think is difficult to pull off, but when it is, it's just masterful.
Very fair. How about you, Kirsten? How do you feel about the humble comedy horror comedy, whichever way around you want to call it?
Yeah, no, I love a good horror comedy. Horror comedy horror. I like them when they are just really stupid, with Josh talking about Shaun of the Dead. That is just, it's just wholesome cheese, it's just silly, it's just funny jokes and just really good British humour. I really do prefer comedy horrors that are British. I don't know why. I feel like we just have a really good sense of humour when it comes to doing dark comedies, comedy horrors. And I really enjoy them. I think all of my favourites definitely are British. And I can't really think of a lot of sort of dark comedies that are American, I think, because they've just got a different sense of humour. But yeah, I prefer a proper comedy horror than what is known as a dark comedy. And again, that could just be because a lot of them are American. But for me, they're not immediate comedies. I remember watching, is it Cabin in the Woods? And I wasn't aware that it was a dark comedy. It wasn't supposed to be taken seriously. And because I didn't get that vibe, I remember sitting there watching it. I was like, this is really stupid. They're really just taking the piss now. And then I remember turning it off. I was like, I'm not watching this. This is stupid. And then my friend came up to me, he was like, no, it's a comedy. It's a comedy horror. I was like, oh, put it back on. And it was one of my favorite films. It was one of my favorite comedy horror films. But I think because it's not immediate, I feel with a horror comedy with Shaun of the Dead, it's very immediately, oh, it's stupid. It's just a horror comedy. It's just supposed to be taken lightly. And so I like it when it hits you in the face with, yes, this is a comedy. It's not supposed to be taken seriously, other than kind of just sneaking bits in and just being sort of oh, that seemed a bit out of place for a horror. Why is he making stupid jokes? Why is this just not seeming like they're taking it seriously? So I like them. I just like it to be obvious.
Yeah, like a big, brash in your face one. I think that's very fair, because there's loads of different types and subgenres and kind of ways that they play out, where it's some of them will be horror movies that are so scary they walk the line of being farcical, which I think is an interesting way of looking at it, because I feel like every horror movie has a bit of inherent comedy to it. Josh, you were saying before the podcast that you think everything has to have a bit of crack about it to be like a good horror movie. It's got to have a moment of like comedy in it, because horror is such like a subjective experience of what scares you. Comedy is such a subjective experience of what scares you. Melding them together is probably the easiest way of getting something from the audience that you want, but it is incredibly hard to pull off for some reason, considering that you'd think it would be quite easy to go, oh, well, it's got all the good parts of horror, it's got all the good parts of comedy, surely someone's going to react to this. But yeah, so that's kind of why we're here, to look at the very best ones, which we'll go through shortly, and then some underrated ones, and then kind of some other places where comedy has cropped up in horror or should have cropped up in horror and didn't, and just kind of break it down that way. But yeah, so to jump right in with kind of our like titular, what are the best horror comedies? I'm gonna ask you guys, what are the best horror comedies? What are your favorites? What do you think deserves the gold star of comedy horror? What makes you laugh? What makes you scream? I'm just going on with this question on and on and on. But please tell me, what's the best comedy horror?
Well, actually, the best comedy horror it's going to be the one that Kirsten just mentioned, actually, Shaun of the Dead. I feel like that is the peak of it. And I think oh man, honestly, just getting into like a personal kind of story, I suppose. This was the thing that got me into movies. Like, I've watched that thing to death, hundreds and hundreds of times. I've listened to all of the director's commentaries on it, all of the writing commentaries, all the acting commentaries. I've watched the behind the scenes thing because I was obsessed with it growing up, because I thought it was so funny, and yet it was so indebted to like the horror genre at large. But it wasn't a parody, I don't think, even though its title is like a riff on Dawn of the Dead. Its aesthetic is indebted to motifs and imagery from the wider horror canon. It's not just a parody like, Scary Movie or something. It treats it with respect, and it also treats its characters with respect. And I think that's the big difference to what you were getting into there, Kirsten. Like, even though the comedy is wacky and silly at times, the characters take it seriously. The characters play it almost kind of like deadpan. They don't know they're in a comedy, and that's kind of where I sometimes draw the line. Sometimes when it gets too self-referential, or where there is no stakes, that's when I kind of drop off, or when I'm not interested in horror comedies at large. Like when the comedy kind of takes precedence to the point where the world isn't necessarily believable, or the horror isn't believable, or the characters don't feel real. Whereas in Shaun of the Dead, there are real kind of dramatic elements to that movie. Like Shaun, essentially coming of age as a 30-year-old. Like, it works, that through line works, because Simon Pegg sells it and the writing supports it dramatically. You get genuinely dramatically heavy moments in there, like when, spoilers, I guess, for a very old movie, where Shaun's mum dies. Like, that is still, to me, one of the most heartbreaking deaths in any movie ever, like comedy, horror, drama, whatever, because it's sold so well. The characters are so believable, and yet they just happen to be in this kind of ridiculous, exaggerated situation that leads into the comedy. But it's because you are invested in that world first and foremost that I think it ultimately works, and ultimately encourages you to go back to it, because it's not just a disposable kind of laugh or a roller coaster ride that you can put on and have fun. There are meaty things to dig your teeth into if you want, and if you don't want, you can just have a bloody good time.
Bloody good. I like that as a description of it, to be fair. Shaun of the Dead is one of those ones. I wrote out this question. I was like, okay, we're going to do some comedy horror today. I wrote out, I was like, I've written like every other film that's ever existed down in my list of things to talk about, and not Shaun of the Dead. And I feel like it's just because it's so like there and eclipsing as the comedy horror, the funny thing, and such a good movie to go alongside with it. Whereas I think a lot of comedy horrors you have to kind of give some forgiveness to for maybe not appealing in like every way possible. Whereas Shaun of the Dead just hits every beat dead on. Like, it's just it is a great movie, and probably the all-encompassing comedy horror. But this is coming from three British people, I guess. So it's kind of I feel like that kind of sways it a bit. But yeah, Kirsten, I know you love it as well.
Oh, I do. It is the best comedy horror. For someone who absolutely loves zombies anyway, as well as being a huge fan of Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and the whole like Cornetto series that they've got is fantastic. Even besides Shaun of the Dead, when you look at World's End, as well as the name is completely going over. They're just so good. Edgar Wright is just clearly very good at just using comedy within horror, and like I said, clearly being inspired by movies, being inspired by George Romero, Dawn of the Dead series, but not only that, just putting so many other references in his movies. Like, I think I watched something the other day about how there's like 50 odd pop culture references in Shaun of the Dead alone, and you can see that there. You can see that he's just, like I said, it is its own movie. It's just clearly been inspired by something that he's very, very passionate about. And watching Space the other day, seeing that, I think it's the very second episode of Space, and that was what inspired him to be like, oh, let's do a zombie movie, because he just, he loved Resident Evil and Dawn of the Dead. And you can see that in there. And the fact that he uses the same actors and stuff, he's just brilliant. I absolutely love his series, and I love the movies that he's got. It's just the perfect comedy horror. And like Josh said, having having the characters, it's almost like, it's just, they're in this world, it's been taken over by zombies, but it's just a funny group of people. It's funny because the characters themselves are funny. They're not being stupid and making like fart jokes or anything like that. It's just, they just happen to be silly, people and just make stupid jokes and sort of treat this scenario in just like a not serious way. When you think about a zombie apocalypse, you think people, they're going to be panicking and they're going to be freaking out, and they do. But then at the same time, there's other points where they are just like so relaxed, when they're like fighting in the car about who's going to drive the Jag, or, choosing which record to throw at zombies while they're slowly skulking towards them. It's just silly things that you'd be like, why would you do that? But at the same time, you're like, hang on though, would I though? Like, if you had to attack someone, would there be a slight part of you where you're just like, no, don't use that, because I like that. Like, use something that I don't mind getting blood all over it. It is brilliant. It's just the epiphany of just a great horror movie. We can't say it, can we, today? Comedy. That's the one.
Absolutely. I think that they do hit every beat, and it is a great movie. But see, without even thinking of this, my top one would have been The Cabin in the Woods, and I know we've spoke about that just previously, but I love that as, I feel like it's a proper love letter to the genre. It's all the same reasons that I love Shaun of the Dead. I love The Cabin in the Woods because it's very much taking a genre that that you kind of like steeped all your knowledge in, and that like celebrates all the different facets of things that have come before it in its own unique, like, hey, I'm here having a good time, I'm in a horror movie kind of way. And I love The Cabin in the Woods. I love all the monsters at the end. I love this movie so much, just full of cubes of monsters, which I think is my favorite thing in any film ever, having as many monsters as this one does. But all of the funny notes, they're not in your face. It's very much funny for its breakdown of the genre and the breakdown of the tropes and the breakdown of the things you expect to see, and funny how it kind of opens up how we've relied on these like tropes and things and cliches, and then shows them to us and goes, actually, you see this in every film ever. What do you think about that in this film? And like when I first watched it as well, I was very much like, oh my God, this is a rip-off of The Evil Dead. Get this off my screen. How could they do this? Ugh. And then clocked. So I was like, oh wait, no, okay, I get it now. I understand now. Watched it again, and like, just one of my favorite things ever. I think that obviously means that we have to talk about Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness and all that sort of thing as well, because that's a very easy walking on point, and one of the ones that gets brought up all the time as the best comedy horror ever is Evil Dead 2, and good old Ash, the best.
Ash versus the Evil Dead, or Ash versus the Evil Wed, I suppose you could say.
There it is.
A little reference there. I think like the thing that all of these movies have in common, and like you even mentioned it there, like they are love letters to the genre, and I feel like some bad comedy horrors are kind of embarrassed of like horror tropes, or they're embarrassed of kind of like horror audiences. Sometimes it feels like they kind of want to take the piss out of themselves and have their cake too. That's not a saying, but it is now. And I feel like Cabin in the Woods definitely does that, because it's not just being self-referential or kind of lampshading tropes or something. In the same way as Scream, even though Scream is kind of less of a comedy, I'd say, than the ones we're talking about. It doesn't just kind of point towards the conventions of horror and go, Hey, we recognize that. You recognize that. We're not going to do anything with them, though. It takes those conventions, spins them on their head, has its fun with it, but then also adds an extra layer to it through kind of like that finale, which is kind of bold and ambitious and entirely its own thing, with the same as like Scream. Scream is built around, subverting horror tropes, but it's also about giving us a new horror icon in Ghostface, the Ghostface killer. And stuff like that. So it's not just made up of references. it is indebted to other horror movies, but it's very much, you know, it has its own originality, you know, own imagination to put its spin on it. And that's why I respect those movies so much. And I kind of feel like you wouldn't have those without Evil Dead and I guess the entire Evil Dead trilogy, like you mentioned. Like the second movie is partly a remake of the first, you know, in the first 50 minutes or so. And it takes kind of the accidental silliness of that first movie because it was made on a shoestring budget and some of the effects looked a little bit dated, especially today, and kind of said, yeah, we can run with that. We can make that the intent. We can have, you know, some genuinely scary sequences, some genuinely great makeup and set pieces, but also we can draw attention to how farcical this is. We can take inspiration from, you know, Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, the silent era of physical comedy, and we can do it within this space that at the time hadn't really been explored in that way, and like transplanting that kind of like comic sensibilities onto a horror movie was so straight-faced and so kind of without any embarrassment or without any sort of, you know, worry. It's so confident. I feel like at the time, especially, like that just hadn't been done, and now everyone rips off that style. Like to an extent, Shaun of the Dead even rips off, you know, a lot of Sam Raimi-isms, you know, for like the best, because like that sort of passion behind the movie combined with the talent in the movie just made for, again, like that's up there with Shaun of the Dead for me, is like the two peaks of the subgenre.
Yeah. I feel like they come together, don't they, as like the dual suns in the sky of, oh, beat me down with these rays of wonderful horror comedy. And I'm spinning into metaphor because they are so lovely. They are such excellent films. Evil Dead is definitely up there as one of those ones that is heralded as an all-time great, and I think very fairly so, and I think very influential across the rest of the genre as a whole. And kind of that whole 80s period of slashers where they got silly, I think is another important part of horror comedy in general. But you mentioned Scream when you were talking about things a bit earlier. And I'm glad you brought this up because I purely just want to talk about Twitter for a moment. Did you guys see the like Ghostface compilation that was on there the other day?
No, I didn't know.
Right. This is the funniest thing I've seen in ages because I just hadn't clocked it in any of the Scream films quite how much Ghostface falls over when like he's got like when whoever's wearing the mask is running around. Always like falls over or is absolutely like booted into things and is fully like just flailing all over the place. And there's like this minute or 2 minute long clip. Yeah, exactly. He's got his dumb mask on. He's getting like Sydney absolutely clocking him one. And there's this compilation of him falling over all the time so much. And it's kind of like a very small comedy moment that I hadn't picked up on in the films that had like, you know, increased my enjoyment of it. But seeing it taken out and kind of put in its separate space where it's like, okay, here's all the moments this happens. It is very funny. Was just a new appreciation for Scream that I didn't really like think about quite as much before.
Yeah, well, right, okay, staying on the Scream topic, like, in Scary Movie especially, and don't get me wrong, right, I have a real soft spot in my heart for the original Scary Movie trilogy, like the first two, and the first three, I guess. Like, I've watched them so much, like, growing up, like, I used to watch them over and over again. We used to reenact scenes in the playground of primary school where I'm
shaking my head, man.
Whoever watched them, right? But one thing I think they get wrong, especially in that first movie, is, like, yeah, like Scream is already funny. Scream already knows what it is, and they actually take the piss of like Ghostface falling over all the time in Scary Movie. But it's like that was the point to begin with. Like just exaggerating and embellishing the joke doesn't take away from the fact that that joke was already there. Like you said, it is something you might only notice when it's put together in a compilation. But that's an intentional kind of little reference or gag. You know what I mean? Because back in the day, like you had Jason who teleported everywhere and was essentially this mountain of a man who, you know, wouldn't fall over in the same way because that would be embarrassing and you don't want to undermine your antagonist in that way. But Scream kind of like, it let that happen. And as a result, I do think not only is it funny when you get it pointed out, but it does make Ghostface kind of more threatening, even though because he's more vulnerable, because it's just a dude in it. To me, that adds to like the believability of it is just some dude, some random craphead teenager in like a costume with a big knife, and in a way you can make that scary because it is quite realistic in a way, even if it is in this exaggerated, obviously horror setting.
Makes them more human, doesn't it? Like we said, comparing it to someone like Jason, which is sort of more like a supernatural being. Like, if he fell over, you would be like, hang on a second, like, isn't he supposed to be this big, mighty, scary, supernatural being? Like, he can't be falling over. But like you said, seeing this ghost face person take these tumbles, you start to sort of click, maybe subconsciously, like, hang on, maybe he isn't some sort of entity. Maybe it is just like a human being just being very evil, which obviously, you know, spoiler alert, it turns out to be. Yes, it's very subtle, but yeah, I'm now thinking about it, he does take a lot of tumbles.
Yeah, I think just calling him Ghostface as well is just like, oh, chef's kiss for something that like you don't realize how dumb half the names are. Like calling Michael Myers the Shape. I know it's not meant to be funny, but I think it's always quite funny. It's like, ooh, the Shape is coming. I don't know. It doesn't feel like an actual like spooky horror name, like, you know, the Springwood Slasher or the Woodsboro Stabber. I don't know. It's called Ghostface, but I think just calling him Ghostface is a really nice touch as well. But to keep this content train moving, choo choo, let us talk about our underrated comedy horrors as well, because there are so many. I feel like we've kind of like encapsulated the peak of the wonderful mountain of comedy horror, but there are so many other hilarious films that do actually manage to get it right and get lost in the absolute reams of spoof movies and parodies that take precedence because they have more advertising or marketing. There are so many funny movies out there that deserve more love, or maybe don't get looked upon as favorably because people see it as just a horror movie, just a comedy movie, as we spoke about before. So start me off. Tell me what your favorite underrated ones are that you would recommend to our audience, lovely listeners. What do you want them to know about?
Honestly, right. And I feel like this is a movie that gets talked about enough, but not in the terms of kind of its comedic elements, and that's Midsummer. Like, I saw this with you, Ash, and a few other friends, and when we were kind of watching it, I think everyone in the audience sort of had that worry of they didn't really know what they were seeing, especially going after Hereditary. I know I expected something like really intense, something really scary. And you get that from the opening sort of 5 minutes or so. This essentially a spiritual successor to that movie in how dark it is and in terms of content and stuff. But I think as that movie progresses, you realize that it does have a lot of crack about it. It does know what it is. It does know the conventions it's playing to. And it is funny. And it took me like 2 hours of the movie to kind of shrug off my own preconceptions about what I wanted it to be, and then realize what it was doing. And even though it is kind of like horrific and it deals with some like incredibly weighty topics, it is unafraid to also have fun with a lot of what's going on, and a lot of the horror in there is kind of tongue-in-cheek in a way. Like there's a bit where I can't remember his name. I think it's Will Poulter. He does a big wee on, I think it's a sacred tree, and then they start talking about his penis and stuff. And I remember, like, I was cracking up at the cinema at that point because I feel like it is comedic, but it's sort of done in a way that's overwhelming. Like considering the runtime, considering the horror that's in there, considering these weird tonal shifts. Like I feel like it all adds to make for this deeply kind of strange and overwhelming experience when you're watching it, which ultimately adds to the horror. But I feel like that movie and The Lighthouse, which came out, I guess last year for Americans now, like all of the, when I saw write-ups about these movies, it was in terms of they're so scary, they're so intense. And I don't think that's untrue, but also I feel like they are funny as well. They know what they are in a good way, and it doesn't detract from their importance or their place in elevated horror or whatever, or their scares. But you can have both. You can have a deeply disturbing movie that's also funny as hell. That's also, it cracks you up and just like does something different with its horror.
Yeah, I think personally, if something is like funny in like an understated way, it makes it so much more scarier. Like for me, like definitely for me, I don't know about you guys, but like if I'm watching some like Midsummer, I didn't really click with it at first, but when I watched it the second time and was like, oh my God, I love this movie, it was because I felt myself being deeply disturbed by it. Because I was like, oh, this is funny, but also these people like are drugged in a strange place, like wandering around, and bodies are turning up. People are being blood eagled, like, and they're just wandering around going, oh, let's take some psychoactives and put a man in a bear. Like it's the way it kind of presents like horror as a light-hearted, jovial thing to enjoy. And then when you think about it, you go, oh, that is the worst situation ever. I don't want to be anywhere near that. That is deeply terrifying. All of this imagery is deeply terrifying, but it's being presented in a, haha, look at this kind of way, like kind of like a children's drawing of a devil, like that sort of like level of thing, isn't it?
I think it taps into like the hysteria of horror as well. Like Ari Aster does it great in Hereditary. I rewatched that recently. And I remember that got a big laugh in the cinema, you know, when the spoilers again, the grandma's body is in the attic and the husband goes up and you sort of hear the scream because he's saying I'm sick of this, I'm done. Obviously there's not a body in the attic. Then he goes up, there's a body in the attic. He screams. And I remember like the cinema laughed during that moment. And at the time I was a bit like, well, you're not supposed to be laughing during the horror movie. This is art, this is prestige stuff. But rewatching it again, like it is funny because it does catch you up in that kind of the ridiculousness of the situation and what these characters must be feeling. And there are breaks like that where it's almost so manic and so scary that it comes round to being like you're hysterically laughing because it's just so ridiculous, and like your concept of reality and your grasp of your own kind of reality and mind is just broken, and all of the emotions come tumbling out afterwards.
I think it's almost like the equivalent of like overacting, almost like they're pushing it so far where you can't help but like laugh at it, but then it then comes around and you're like, oh, actually no, this is still scary. You know, it's like with Hereditary, with, you know, the decapitating scenes and stuff, like the way that Toni Collette is like looking at the camera, she's sort of like and it's so creepy that you're sort of like, haha, like why does she look like that, and you're sort of laughing, but then at the same time you're like, no, it's back to being scary again. And I think that, yeah, Ari Aster seems to do that really well with both Hereditary and Midsommar, where it's so deeply disturbing, but then it goes into kind of like, oh, I feel like I should have a laugh because that's really, really stupid. But then you get back to, no, actually, that's really disturbing. I don't like that. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I didn't actually realize that until you just said that. I was like, yeah, actually, there is a lot of moments in both those films where I was like, heh. Like, that's really stupid. But then I was like, actually, I don't like that anymore. I don't want to watch. And yeah, I didn't like it. But no, for me, a really underrated horror comedy has to be Doghouse. And again, it's just the British person in me. I love a bit of Danny Dyer in a horror situation. I don't know why, it just works. Okay, Danny Dyer, if you are listening, please can you do more horror movies, because it just works. And I don't know if either of you have seen Doghouse. I think Josh might have. But,
I haven't seen it. No, I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, basically Doghouse is another zombie movie, but it has such a good twist with how they turn. I won't say it because it's definitely worth watching, because it's such it's just a really stupid concept as to how they turn into zombies. So it's like, huh? But basically only the women in this town turn into zombies, and they go to this town to visit someone's grandma or something, because they want to have like a lad's night out and go to the pub and all that sort of stuff to cheer their mate up, because he's just got dumped or got divorced or something. And yeah, all the women in this town have turned into zombies, and they've just completely murdered all the men. And it's just so good because it's just proper like London British humour. You know, it's Danny Dyer like, f off, mate, like, oh, come on, show us your tits and all that sort of stuff. And then they just come over and try and bite his face off. It's just so good. And there's just so many stupid aspects of it. There's even sort of like special zombies, almost like what you get in like Left 4 Dead games or something. You know, there's like the sword wielding zombie, and then there's the barber zombie with like scissors, and then there's this really big grotesque fat zombie. And it's so good because it's just so gory and so British. And yeah, honestly, Danny Dyer in that film is just fantastic because he's just typical. Like, I've never seen Danny Dyer be more Danny Dyer, if that makes sense. Like, he's just so like, at the start he's just sort of like very, oh, this is stupid, sort of like, you know, typical Danny Dyer. And then by the end of it, he's just sort of like, like sort of crying, just like, we have to get out of here. And it's just like, yes, that's what I love. I love seeing this big man just go from being this big old, oh, look at me, I'm all tough, and then gets faced with female zombies that want to basically eat him alive. And he just breaks down into this like crying, withering mess. And it's so good. It is such a brilliant, underrated British like horror zombie movie, and it's just, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend going to watch it. It's so good. And just a quick shout out to another great Danny Dyer horror comedy is Severance. I think that's what it's called. I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember that also being like having comedy aspects in it, and is also Danny Dyer just being Danny Dyer basically in a horror movie. It's really, really good. So yeah, shout out to Severance as well. It's a very good one.
Oh, see, I get why it's called Doghouse now. I get the joke.
Yeah. They're in the dog ass, mate.
Lady zombies. I get it. I get why that's funny. But no, that's I like Danny Dyer when he's being peak Danny Dyer. So that sounds like good fun.
So good.
I think for one that I would have to shout out as an underrated one, and keeping with the British theme, would be Attack the Block. Like, I feel that's kind of had a resurgence recently. People have gone, look at this John Boyega film, and rightly so, because it is an amazing little kind of more sci-fi leaning, action heavy kind of funny moments in it, that has that kind of level of humor. but I have so many other films that I've written down that I'm like, I need to talk about all of these. What We Do in the Shadows as well, for like a little mix up of taking something scary and spooky that is being classically very, oh, okay, that's very terrifying, vampires and werewolves, and then just making them soft and nice, not even poking fun at them, just having a nice time with some vampires and werewolves, and like kind of playing off the silliness of that. Like, and talking about how like when something funny makes it inherently scarier. I don't think I've been more scared of Nosferatu than in What We Do in the Shadows. He's not even supposed to be funny. He's called like Paul or something. And I was like, oh, please send Paul away. It was too much.
Paul is so spooky, if that is his name. Like, yeah, like it's funny how he can do that, because it is such a, like you said, it's about a bunch of soft lads, isn't it? Like they're just like nice little boys, but they're also vampires and I guess murderers, but they want to clean up the house. They don't want to get blood on the rug, because why would you want to get blood all over the rug? But then you do have this Nosferatu type in the basement who's genuinely scary. And I think it's because they don't like draw attention to how really scary he is. He just sort of is there. And it's like, that is so unnerving. How have you managed to make, you cut through the comedy, probably not even like, there's nothing in the kind of text really that's like pointing you towards like this being a scary beat. It's no like a swelling of sound or no kind of like jump scare or anything. It's just, here is this really scary monster that we also have. And it's kind of creepy, that, isn't it? In this otherwise very funny movie.
Oh, absolutely is. I think there's something to be said, which kind of we haven't really picked up on yet, but that like our like primal response to something scary or anything that kind of unnerves us is you either are scared and you have your like fight, flight, freeze options. You're like, oh, but the other option is your body will make you laugh and make you go, oh, that's very funny, to kind of like lower your intense feelings towards it. And that's why horror comedy should work so much better than it does and be so much more popular, and why it has such like a cult loving fan base for it. I think it's because even when it's really scary, people's reactions are like, that's funny and good, because your body then like ramps up everything to make you go, ha ha ha, even though you don't really want to. And the films that play with that the most are the ones that are the most effective and the best. And having even tiny moments like the What We Do in the Shadows, Mr. Paul, the vampire Nosferatu, making him in a like putting him in a funny situation where we're forced to go, haha, that's quite silly and funny, and then going, oh, actually he looks quite spooky. How do I reconcile these feelings? Is definitely a great way of doing it. And I think it works the other way as well, where you laugh so much. Like you talk about the hysteria, something like Beetlejuice really scared me as a kid. I couldn't watch the sandworms scene where they go outside and like the doors open and there's like this big vast desert and the worms start coming out. And when Beetlejuice turns into a snake and goes up the stairs, like a big slithery, I think he's got like a rattlesnake end tail. Both of those scared me beyond anything else when I was like a kid growing up. So I was like, it was supposed to be in this funny setting. I was supposed to be having a nice time. And then Beetlejuice was being a creepy ass. Like it wasn't pleasant at all. And that kind of mirrors the opposite way of it, where it's much scarier because it's in a funny situation. You're supposed to be having a nice time. And I think that's why people like horror houses and horror experiences so much as well, because you're going around going, I'm in a scary situation, but I'm going to laugh at it. Or the other way around, be like, oh, this is all fun and games, but there's something a little scary on the end of it. And that weird dichotomy between the two is like a tightrope to be walking down. But yeah, that was a big load of words for you from me. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Do you have any other underrated ones that you want to like kind of shout out? Because I think we're getting towards the end of the pod and I want to get in all the picks. Right. Okay.
For me, I have two. I have one that I've actually mentioned on this podcast before, and I only ever get to mention it at the very end. One day I want to sit everyone down. And I'm going to talk to you about it and convince you to watch Why Don't You Just Die, which is a recent Russian kind of, it's like, it blends genres. So there are elements of horror in there. It's horror comedy, kind of like thriller stuff. But it's like, it's the closest thing, I guess, to Evil Dead, not necessarily in terms of content, but in terms of kind of energy and tone and kind of camera work and stuff. It is so ultra violent, but so kind of like confident and aware of of the genres that it's playing in. It's mostly set in one apartment, which is kind of like Evil Dead itself with the cabin. But it makes such great use of the space. It makes such great use of the characters. It has a genuinely, surprisingly well told story. And also it uses like gore and violence in a really funny way, and not in a way that it's like just gross. It is very gross at times, but like Kirsten was saying right at the very beginning, it doesn't just sort of indulge in kind of like the nihilism of it. It's not just kind of like trying to push buttons or anything. It's not just being like, this is disgusting, isn't it? Let's have a bit of a laugh at it. It like uses it in like quite inventive ways, and I would definitely recommend that. And Prevenge, which is I've completely forgotten the Alice Law. I'm pretty sure it's Alice Law, and it's about this to-be mother who is getting kind of like a psychic link with her child, who is telling her to murder people from the womb, and it is very funny and very good, and I would definitely recommend that. That's also British as well, so kind of in keeping with the theme.
Oh, I've got nice little picks from all over the shop here, I think. But yeah, how about you, Kirsten? How about yours?
I think I've got to have to shout out Slither, because that was one that I remember watching when I was in secondary school. And again, I think do you know what? This is how old it was. Pretty sure we got it from Blockbusters. So it was a while ago. And we just saw it. We thought it was like a horror movie because it said it was a horror movie, and it said it was about a town that were plagued by alien sort of parasites. So we watched it at a sleepover, thinking it was going to be this really scary film, and it was just so stupid. And I remember that we were just wetting ourselves by the end of it. We thought it was so funny because it's just stupid. You know, it's just this little sort of town in the middle of nowhere that basically just gets attacked by these sort of parasitic aliens that sort of start to take over people's bodies. But there's just so many stupid bits, like it's got the guy, I don't know what the name of the actual actor is, but he was in The Walking Dead. He played Daryl's brother, which I don't remember what his name in that either, but he's in this, and he's basically the main alien guy. He becomes this weird sort of worm thing, I guess, but I just remember thinking he looked so stupid and funny because he's just kind of all morphed, and he kind of sort of runs with his little wiggly arms, and I was wetting myself, but I was crying. It was so stupidly funny. And I just also remembered there's this person called like Brenda, I think her name is it like Brenda or Barbara, but they find her in a barn, and she's just so fat, like she's like the size of this barn, and she's like, I'm just so very hungry. Could you feed me that dead possum? And it's so stupid. It's so stupid and gory and disgusting, but you can't help but laugh at it because it's just so gross. So yeah, if you haven't seen Slither, it's really just stupid and just really funny. And considering it's American, I quite enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed the stupid, gory humor. Yes.
Is that it's James Gunn who did that one, isn't it?
I think so, and it's got I'm not good with the actresses' names, but it has, I do know her name, but it has an actress in it, which a blonde actress, I cannot remember for the life of me her name, but you would recognise her if you saw her. She's from Zack and Miri Makes a Porno. I can't remember her name, but it's killing me. It's right there, but I can't remember it. I'll remember it like before we leave, and I'll be like, ha! This, but I can't remember her name.
Play out, honestly. I'm just enjoying it going, the name!
It's honestly killing me. It's like right there. I feel like I know it, but I can't remember it. But if I do, I will just shout it out. So just prepare yourself. But it's very, very good. It's just really, everyone's just kind of overly southern, and it's just sort of like, what you doing over there, boy? And then they just get like their brains sucked out. It's just stupid fun.
Oh, wholesome family fun for everyone, sounds like. No, the kind of three more underrated ones. It's just anything Samara Weaving's in. I like anything she does. Yeah. She is hilarious. She is a new age horror comedy princess. I love her. Like, she's just amazing. So like Ready or Not, Mayhem, The Babysitter, all of them absolute bangers. And then I have to recommend again One Cut of the Dead, because it is brilliant. And I've said it before, so I'm not going to go into that one, but it's just so unexpected, and just hold out with it until you get to the last moments, and oh boy, will you have a laugh. Now, there's plenty of other films that we've got written down, and also a lot of kind of about the negative side of comedy horror and when things don't particularly land and the problems it can cause. But we have spoken for quite a while already about all the good ones, so I figure that can kind of be a follow-up podcast if you guys want to hear that, if you want to hear us talk about the bad sides as well. But just one more piece before I finish off is just Christmas comedy horror. I mentioned this before we started. Christmas comedy horror is always the best comedy horror. It is always funny. I'm not sure why. I think I just get manic at Christmas and I'm like, haha, everything is the best. So like Krampus, Gremlins, Anna and the Apocalypse, a musical horror comedy. Yes. All good. I'm just going to keep on spewing them out. Dead Alive, Brain Dead, Behind the Mask, all of them. Meta comedy, spoof comedy. there's loads more out there that are brilliant. But we want to know what you think as well, what you guys want to suggest for your favorite comedy horrors, underrated ones, best ones. What do you think is the comedy horror comedy Hall of Fame pick? Let us know in the comments section below, and get in touch with us on Twitter if you have anything else to talk about with WhatCulture horror stuff. You can find us at WCulture Horror, and you can find me at Ash Millman, and you can find Kirsten
at Kirsten Rio with 2 A's,
and you can find Josh
at Josh Brune with 2 O's.
And it'll be very funny and scary is my good closing line. I was trying to think of something. It'll be funny and also scary, like a good comedy horror.
Comedy horror.
Comedy horror.
Right. Now, I'm going to finish up. We're going to end the podcast. So thank you so much for watching. And we'll probably follow this up with kind of the negative side and all that sort of thing as well. But if you want to see that, you got to let us know. So let us know in the comments. Let us know your favorites. And we'll be back again. Weekly horror podcasts. This is the end now. I'm getting to the end. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.